Welcome back to the Carrot and Stick podcast, a podcast series where we look to get under the skin of all things sales performance management and motivation to understand what makes our wonderful world of recruitment tick. Today's episode is probably the favorite episode I've ever done. No offense, of course, to our previous podcast guests, but I'm sitting down with Greg Savage. And if you're in the industry and you haven't heard his name, I don't know how at this point. He's been in the industry now for 45 years and has got tons of experience and stories and insights that he shares with us today. And of course, through the work that he does outside of just this podcast. He has set up and sold his own recruitment business. He's been an international CEO that went through an MBO. He set up the Savage Recruitment Academy, has written 2 books, does countless advisory and consultancy gigs. The man really is still so truly involved in the industry and has his finger on the pulse of what's going on that it makes today's talk even more insightful. It's not like you're speaking to someone that hasn't done the job for about 25 years. He is very much involved in what's going on today, which is why with his separate platform for training recruiters, he's so involved in things like AI to understand what its future means for recruitment. Today, we talk through things that are very, very close to my heart. We go through not being able to manage what you can't measure, so the importance of KPIs, despite them being quite a dirty word in the recruitment world these days. Greg and myself completely agree they should not be. If nothing else, they're about empowerment. We also talk about what taking people from being good to being great looks like, from when they first join the business all the way through to when they're on the top of the world as a top biller in your business. How do you keep on helping them get that little bit more? And spoilers, it all comes down to a little bit of accountability and a little bit of empathy. As said, this is one of my favorite episodes. You're going to absolutely love this one. It is ram-packed with value. So without further ado, let's get into it with Greg Savage. Awesome. Right, let's dive in. Greg, thank you so much. It's very fun to be talking to someone on the other side of the world. It either means a late night for you or an early morning for me. And I feel we've kind of struck the balance pretty well. What time is it for you right now?
It's about 7 o'clock, 10 past 7
Perfect.
in the evening. But given that it's summer here, it's light. And it's hot today, very hot.
It's 8 a.m. here and it's barely light, which tells you a lot about winters in the UK. Very dark and very miserable, which I feel like I can use to describe most of the year, to be honest with you. But we're not here to moan the UK and our wonderful weather system. We're here to talk about you. So I imagine most people probably have heard the name Greg Savage, but let's hear it from the man himself. Do you want to tell us a bit more about yourself, what you're up to these days? Give us the full spiel.
Well, I'll give you the short version because it covers 45 years, not my age, my recruitment career. So we'll do that quickly. So, been a recruiter since January 1980, worked in the UK, worked in executive search, started my own company with 2 other guys in the late 80s, and 12 years later, we listed that on the Australian Stock Exchange. So that was a very successful business, very proud of the things that we did then and the innovations that we brought in. It was only the 3rd company ever to list on the 3rd recruitment company ever to list on the stock exchange. Then I worked for a company called Recruitment, which is an American marketing and digital recruitment agency. And I was their international CEO, which in an American company means everything outside America. You got America and then you got the rest. But that was big by the time we finished. 35 offices in 17 countries, and that took me to some very interesting places to run recruitment businesses. And then we engineered a management buyout of a big chunk of that business. It was called Firebrand. We ran that for 3 or 4 years and then sold it. And then in the last 10 years, I've been an advisor. Until recently, I've been on the board of 16 different recruitment companies in 4 countries. I've pared it back to about 12 or 10 or 12 now because I'm trying to cut it back. And also helped found a company called People to People, which was 3 ex-recruitment solutions employees. That business grew to over 100 million in sales, and I'm still on the board of that business. So I'm very fortunate because I'm on the inside of so many companies. I'm hearing what they're doing. I'm seeing what's working. I'm seeing what's failing. I travel a lot. I was recently in your country speaking at the Recruitment Expo, so I met hundreds of owners there. Then I went to the Czech Republic, did the keynotes at a conference called Evolve, so that introduced me to a lot of. So I'm fortunate. So I've got all that experience, and that counts for a lot. But being current is the challenge for all of us, especially in a world that changes so fast. So I'm grateful for that opportunity to mix, and people pay me to be an advisor, and I think they get good value. But to be perfectly honest, I learn as much from the next generation coming through as they learn from me, because everyone's doing new things with tech and other things. It's good.
Amazing. I'm sure we'll get towards the end of our main topics today. I'll have loads of questions around what are you seeing as the main things that have kind of the forefront of how recruitment operates today, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. I think that the big one is worth mentioning, of course, like for the last 10, 11 years, you've done the advisory piece. The last 3 years, you've had the the academy you're now running as well. You mentioned the books a bit earlier on as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a shameless plug, but I have written 2 books on recruitment. The Savage Truth, which has sold
I still love that
15,000
title.
copies.
Fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's my name, but and it's also my style. And that's kind of tells the story of companies built, a lot of mistakes made and lessons learned. And then this book, Recruit the Savage Way, is really a handbook on how to be a great recruiter. Personally, I was a good recruiter. I was nowhere near the best in any of the companies I worked in, but I was good. You would have hired me probably. But I learned from all those outstanding people around me. And I learned from those who failed, because that book includes things you should and shouldn't do. I've also translated all of that, 45 years of being in one industry and the things that I've done. I'm very fortunate. Onto a learning academy, which is called the Savage Recruitment Academy. And that's got 200 hours of video training. We've recently introduced an AI assistant, which is, we could talk about this at length, but I won't, because we've got other important, it's really, really cool, because I've been making a study of AI, because I think we've all got to go against the grain. And by that, I mean, if there's something you're uncomfortable with, that's the thing you should tackle and learn. So I've made it my business. I did it with social media as well. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. But then I realized it was going to impact the industry. This is 20 years ago. And now I've got 350,000 LinkedIn connections, so
you're probably one of the most followed recruitment influencers, dare I say. I hate the word, but recruitment influencers in the world, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I guess certainly it's a massive follow. 1 million people a year read my blog, etc. So, and that's just because I work hard at quality content, right? But it's the same with AI. So I've actually made it my business to try and understand it. It's fast moving. And there's so much nonsense spoken about AI on both sides of the argument. It's going to change everything. Recruiters are dead. On the other side, AI is a hoax. It's all the human. It's not either of those things. It's a blend. It's a marriage of art and science. And so that's a fascinating thing. And with the academy, what I've done, well, I didn't do the tech, but this is interesting, because one of the big challenges for anyone in recruitment or in sales is training your recruiters or your salespeople. And I've been a trainer for 40 years, but I've always been skeptical about it, because you train someone or a team, they go, yeah, everyone's excited. They go back to their desks and they do nothing different, right?
Yeah.
And 2 days later, they've forgotten 90%. So while the training's good, I mean, the content of my academy is good. What we've now done is introduce an AI assistant, which is a Chrome extension, and it allows the recruiter, in this case, to say, hey, I'm about to call somebody and offer them a job. Can you give me some tips? And then the avatar comes up, which is me, which is the scary part. But it goes not to chat. Yeah, it doesn't go to chat GPT. It goes to my content. So if you trust the content, it'll give you an answer from that in the moment, right? And so I love that, because it's actually helping a recruiter while she is hitting roadblocks and obstacles, right? And we've got people not getting enough training from their leadership. We've got people working from home. We've got newbies struggling. And this is a great tool to help them. So, that is a plug for the academy, and people should have a look at it. It's on my website. But mostly it's a plug for just understanding how tech can help people get better.
Yeah. I love the little lesson already from that one, which is when you feel like not so much afraid of something, but you're kind of like, oh, no, it's not for me. Actually run at it and really try and understand it. It's really good to hear. That's the closest I've got to hearing in recruitment, at least, how close we've got to what we often see in B2B software world, which is where you'll have call assistants that will sit on live calls with you and will give you information as you're going through, i.e. it's listening to what they're saying, what you're saying. And with AI, we'll come to you and say, hey, here's the kind of thing you should be asking about now. Or based on what we see inside of your CRM, here's something you should be aware of. This person moved a job last year. This person did that. Ask them about this. And it really helps assist you on the calls. And it sounds like you're getting very close towards that point. And I haven't really yet seen that in the market. So exciting times.
It's not available in training yet. So I guess other people will do it. The world's moving fast. But, I think going back to your point about one of the dysfunctional parts of recruitment, and I love recruitment, right? It's my whole life, right? So when I start giving recruitment and recruiters a hard time, it's with love, it's with a hug. But one of the dysfunctional parts of recruitment is if you become a good recruiter, you tend to plateau. And we're fed that by our leadership. Greg's the greatest recruiter. Look at his billings. And then we close off to learning. It's just at that time that we should be opening up to more, because every recruiter can get better. I mean, who can't get better? And it's only in the context of your own company that you're a superstar. The fact that I'm on the boards of all these companies, I keep on having to remind people that your biggest biller wouldn't even get a job across the road. So we've all got to be getting better. And recruiters, look, all human beings gravitate to their safe space, which is, I did it before, this is what works, and I'll stay there. Well, a lot of people come unstuck with that over time, particularly with the change, not only in technology, but in client expectations, candidate behavior. We have to constantly evolve. Otherwise, you get left behind.
Totally. 100% agree. And that's ultimately why you've got things like the book out, right? And I imagine a good chunk of what we'll talk through today will be based on what's inside those 2 books that you've written as well. So really keen to dig into this. 3 of those topics that we spoke about earlier. I mean, the first one is a lesson for any business leader in any sector it feels: you can't manage what you don't measure. Rule number 1 to any business it feels. Second one being KPIs aren't a bad thing. They're an outstandingly good thing. Music to my ears, Greg. So thank you for that one. And the third one, which I think is really, really pertinent, is taking good people to great. Because I can guarantee pretty much every business leader I've spoken to will say, yeah, we've got really good people in the business. And it's like, okay, then, but where do you measure the line as being good? And what do you measure as being great? And what do you measure as, well, we've got to do something about this? That ties back into the numbers piece that we spoke about. Should we start at that top then and go with you can't manage what you don't measure first, Stephen, sorry. And give me your thoughts around that first, then we'll dig into the rest as we go through.
Well, it's again one of the ironies of our industry. I see companies, recruitment companies, advertising for recruitment consultants. And one of the things they say is, as a selling
not a KPI business.
Yeah, we are a non-KPI business. And to me, that's like selling a cruise and saying, we're so confident in our cruise ship that we don't have lifeboats. Come on board. It's the stupidest. I mean, it's the thing about KPIs.
I love that. I've got to write that analogy down. That's so good, by the way.
I mean, it is the stupidest thing, the nonsense that is spoken. The fact is that how can you get your business to be better unless you know where you are now? And I'm not just talking about profit or sales. You've got to be looking at and this is for owners, right? Like most recruitment companies, owners do not know what percentage of jobs they fill. They do not know their percentage margin on their temp business, whether it's trending up or down. They do not know what percentage of the dollars, pounds, euros that they spend are spent on staff salaries. It's somewhere between 50 and 70%. And when it gets above 65, you're going to start going bust. They don't even know these things. So how can you improve something? They don't know how many jobs they've got exclusively or they've got in competition. They all know vaguely that it's good if we get exclusive jobs. They all know that, hey, it's good if we... Like I had a conversation with an recruitment owner. He said, things are bad. I said, why? He said, our recruiters 2 years ago were handling 15 jobs each, permanent. And now they're handling 10. It's a disaster. And I said, how many jobs would they need to fill to have a good month? He said, 2. So I said, 2 out of 10? Yeah, but we used to have 15. I said, mate, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Let's get better at qualifying job orders, making them match speed, urgency, accuracy, and we can fill 2 out of 10. We don't need 15. In fact, 15 is worse than 10. You couldn't comprehend it. So you cannot manage what you don't measure, and you can't help a recruiter go from good to great, or from average to good, or from underperforming to acceptable. You know what most recruitment owners do? They say, can you make some placements? And that's like saying to a footballer whose job it is to score goals.
Can you score some goals?
For 7 goals. Can you score some goals? He knows that's the job. He doesn't need your help telling him that. What you need to do is help the person on the steps to that. Right? Now, I'm not going to push the football analogy too far, but that might involve getting into the box, doing this and doing the other thing. But in recruitment, I can push it. That's going to involve activities, the quality of those activities, and doing it with the right people. And that is the secret formula of success in recruitment, and it's all about measurement. Are you doing enough activities? If you want to go with a sporting analogy, are you taking enough shots on goal? It's a very crude, basic metaphor, but it's very accurate. Because the one thing a goal scorer has to do is that she or he has to take shots on goal. And if she doesn't, she won't score. And if she takes 1 a game, she's very unlikely to score. And the analogy with recruitment around taking jobs, getting resumes out, setting up first interviews, visiting clients, and a myriad of other things is exactly mirrored. So if they don't, and here I'll even push the sporting analogy to its nth degree. If you get that footballer to take 15 shots on goal per game, that also is no guarantee of success, because they've got to be high quality shots in the top left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner. It's the same with recruitment. You need high activity of high quality. And so if you're measuring those things, so if I've got a recruiter here who's filling one job out of 5, and a recruiter sitting next to her who's filling one job out of 2, clearly there are lessons there for the 1 out of 5 person. If I've got a recruiter who gets a placement out of 3 candidates sitting opposite a client, and this recruiter gets a placement out of 12 candidates, literally these things happen, they're sitting next to each other. But the owner comes in and says, do more, make more placements. But what he needs to sit with the 1 out of 12 person and say, what about the matching, what the quality of this, and help improve the shots on goal, the number of them, and the accuracy on them. And that's why I say you can't manage what you don't measure. It flows through every part of our business, and it should be the foundation point of coaching people to improve. And there's not enough coaching. No, I've done more training than most people, I would imagine. I've done thousands of training courses around the world. Thousands in my own, and I'm not exaggerating. In 45 years, you'll do thousands when you did a job like mine. And I hope they've helped. But I reckon I have much more impact coaching someone in the moment, right? When somebody puts the phone down and they've had an offer turned down, that is when you can have the biggest impact on their learning. In the moment. People learn, you like some of my quotes, Terry? Well, people learn in the moment of despair or ecstasy, right? So when somebody has an offer turned down or a temp bombs out, that's when you train them or coach them, work through it, and think of better ways. They will remember that. It's much better than saying, let's have a training course on the 4th of June, right? And also the moment of ecstasy, when somebody gets it right, and you say, wow, the way you handled that fee negotiation, Terry, was fantastic. Can you share that story with the whole team? They will never forget that, and they'll replicate it. And these are the skills of leadership that are, look, they're lacking, because the reason is owners of recruitment companies are not bad people. I'm one of them. It's just that mostly we come from being good recruiters, and we've just grown into leadership. And we don't know that our real job is to coach, mentor, and teach people.
It's a classic thing of like people remember how you made them feel, but more than anything, like this is something my mom said to me a few years ago, bless her. She said something along the lines of like, I don't want any more presents at Christmas or birthdays. And I was like, what do you mean? Why not? And she's like, well, not presents, but she wants experiences is what she said to me. And I was like, well, why experiences? And she's like, because ultimately those are the things that I remember. And I think what you're touching on there is exactly that. People remember those moments of where they feel like they're in despair or they've got the highest moment in their career. And if when someone's at their lowest, you're turning around and saying, look, let's weaponize that feeling you've got now, feeling so low and so downbeaten, and use it as a chance to grow again. That's the thing that I remember, right? It sticks far better than, as you say, turn up at this time and listen to 2 hours of teaching and hope that you remember some of it for the next day, right?
Yeah, look, training's good. It's better than nothing, but coaching is better. And you're absolutely right. I run into people in the street and I can't even remember them, but they worked for me 20, 30 years ago. And if they tell me stories about that time, it's always a situation where it was feedback. They don't say, thanks for the beer on a Friday, Greg, 30 years ago, or thanks for buying us donuts. They say, the time you told me that I was doing this and that made the difference. Those are the ones who speak to me, I mean. But you are absolutely right. And that's what it's a mixture of art and science. I said it in a different context earlier. The art is the skill, right? Putting a ball into the top corner from 25 yards out is a skill. Taking shots, number of shots, is a science. You just got to get a number of them. I'm going to leave the football metaphors now.
I'm a big football fan, so it's all good by me.
Oh, mate, wait till I get onto the rugby metaphors. That's when things get serious.
That's when you'll lose me.
Well, there's only one game they play in heaven, so if you're intending to go there, it's not football.
I can believe it.
So anyway, the thing is, going back to the opening point, we've got to understand that measurement isn't a penalty. It's not micromanaging. Micromanaging is when you penalize people on their activities. Measuring so you can help somebody get better is empowering and will help a person go from where they are now to many, many steps up the ladder. In most cases, if they have the raw ability, right? You can't turn an apple into a pear, right? If somebody doesn't have the raw, you've got to have recruited the right people. We can get onto that another time if you wish. But if you've got so many people who should have made it in recruitment didn't, because they had the raw ability, the competencies, the aptitude, the attitude, but they weren't given the coaching. And that is a tragedy.
Love that. I do want to kind of go back a little bit to the whole piece around you can't manage what you measure, because there's probably a whole reason why KPIs are seen as a bad thing, and why we're now at a point, it sounds crazy to say it, where, like you say, jobs are listing and saying, oh, we're a KPI-free environment. Like, look, we sell a tool that's to do with managing data and using it to motivate people. We'll reach out to people to try and get demos booked in, and they'll be like, oh, we don't work that way. We don't use numbers and KPIs to monitor people. And I'm a little bit like, but why? Like, if you ever told a high-performing athlete, oh, don't worry about measuring your running time, for example. Don't worry about measuring your body fat percentage. Just give it a feel. It'll be fine. Like, it'll be successful. It doesn't work that way. Like, if you want to be a high-performing team and high-performing athlete, you've really got to put the numbers in and try and get every single small marginal gain that you can out of a team to be successful. And to kind of ask the larger question, do you think the reason why this whole not wanting to track KPIs thing is because people don't really understand them, because they've been told, here's the numbers that you need to go and do, and people sit there and go, I don't know why, but I'm going to do it so I don't lose my job, and I've been told it's the right way to do things. Someone who's been a recruiter,
that's exactly
not to offend yourself here, Greg, to kind of say, I did this 20 years ago, just trust me, it works. That's why people get a bit tired of hearing about KPIs, I guess, and why people are now afraid to say that they use KPIs out of fear of hiring them. So do you think it's kind of a symptom of people not truly understanding why we're measuring these things?
It's 100% that. People sometimes say KPIs are old school, to which I reply, do you teach your kids to look both ways when they cross the road? And they go, yes. I said, well, that's old school. I was taught that. My mum was taught that. Still kind of important. That's what a KPIs are. There's a very, very good reason for them. And you said something in your little preamble there where you said people say, we don't monitor people. That's the whole point. KPIs are not for monitoring. They're for empowering, right? And the secret is this. You don't walk in, and this is why KPIs can be dysfunctional, and they can be negative, and they can be demotivating. And that's when an owner or some leader walks in and says, do 20 of these. And you've got Carrot and Stick as the name of your podcast, quite apt. And if Absolutely. You do it, I will get you a beer on Friday. And if you don't, you'll be a warning for 5. That is dysfunctional. What you've got to do is you have to understand as the leader how activity leads to success. And then you've got to bring the recruiter on the journey. It's not a case of telling her what to do. It's bringing her on the inside and saying, right, just start like this. Right? And anyone listening to this, do this. Say to your recruiter, I'm talking permanent for the moment. We could do temp as well. It's a bit more complex, so I'll go easy. What's your average placement fee, Mary? What do you mean? What's the average placement fee of all the placements you've made in the last 12 months? And she'll I don't know. Well, as soon as she says that, that's what I'm talking about. You don't know. Okay, well, let's work it. Have a guess. She'll say it's $15,000. And you will have done the numbers, and you'll say it's actually 9. No, it's not. Yes, Mary, it's 9. The way I did is I took all your fees last year and divided the placements, $9,000. I didn't know that. And what's your goal then for this quarter, Mary? Well, it's $100,000. So how many placements do you have to make? Oh, I've never thought of that. Well, 9 into 100 goes 11 or whatever it is. That's 11 placements. That's 1 a week. Now, immediately, I've revolutionized that woman's thinking because she doesn't have to make 100,000. She has to make 1 placement a week.
Yeah.
And then, Mary, how many interviews with your clients, of your candidates with your clients, does it take to make a placement? Oh, I reckon every 3rd one. Well, no, it's actually every 5th one. No, it's not. Well, Mary, here's the numbers. You did 800 of these and da-da-da. It's 5, 1 in 5. So if you're going to make 11 placements this quarter, how many good candidates do you have? Oh, that's 55. Right. So you've got to get 55 candidates sitting in front of clients, or you have to improve your ratio. So you see where I'm going? You're bringing her into the tent. You're getting her. So when she goes out to do a week's work, she's thinking differently. She's thinking, I need to make, whatever the number was, I'll make it up. I need to make 5 interviews this week. And they need to be the right people sitting opposite the right people. And if I do that, I'll hit my numbers. And also, I'm only averaging 9,000 a placement. How can I get that up? Well, that's a good conversation with the recruiter. How can you get your average fee up? It's 9,000. Well, I can increase the percentage. Yes. Or I could work with more senior people. Yes. So which of these shall we tackle? Now, that's a healthy, collaborative. It's not a micromanaging. It's the reverse of micromanaging. It's backwards. It's reverse engineering so a person can understand, because of measurement, what they need to do. And it's a blend. It's not only numbers. And by the way, it'll change depending on the market. And so to answer your question, why people get it so wrong, they foist KPIs on people. They don't understand. They give everyone in the company the same KPIs. That's ridiculous. That's like giving the goalkeeper and the center forward the same objectives. It's ridiculous. They've got different jobs. They're at different stages. Or it's like giving a center forward in the Premier League the same objectives as a under 12B player. You've got to work with your recruiters depending on where they're up to and set them goals that they understand how they flow into the success. And that allows you on a Friday night to say to the recruiter, I know you've made no placements, but don't you worry about that. You've had a great week. Look, you've made these 5 things that we said were important, and you did those 8 things. Let's celebrate. You can allow people to celebrate hitting the activity goals, because the activity will lead on to success. Does that make sense?
Totally. 100%.
Yeah.
I love all that stuff. Like, that is so spot on, because it's like you came on to earlier, like training's got its place, but this is coaching, because in the example you gave, not once did you say, here is the answer in the example that you gave, right? It was constantly, what are the 2 ways that we can do that? What do you need to do to get to that number of placements, for example? What is your average fee? You didn't come there saying, right, here's the average, therefore here's what you're going to do all week long. You're getting them to give them the answer. Like you say, you're bringing them inside and saying, now you tell me what you need to do. I'm not telling you got to do it. You're telling me what you've got to do to get that number that you want, right?
Exactly. And it's so rewarding for the individual, but also what I learned was, 3 months later, you'll see that person at the lift and she'll say, Greg, remember how I was hitting 1 placement out of 5? I've been working on that. It's down to 1 out of 4. And my average placement fee, it's 11, mate. It's 11. It's not 9
electric
anymore. Yeah, I mean the excitement and the achievement and the self-esteem, and it flows onto results and dollars and people's salary, and it actually then flows onto, and this is one of my sayings, that coaching equals longevity in the business. If you coach, if people feel they're getting, the main reason people leave is they don't feel as though they're growing and developing, and coaching gives them that feeling, and it flows onto their results and their self-esteem. And I've used the word self-esteem quite often. It's absolutely pivotal. You need to, people think that you're going to make your recruiters happy by giving them beer and donuts and coffee machines and snooker tables and that. That's
short term, maybe, but
it's all fine. But what you need to do is help them grow and be successful, and treat them with respect, and invest and show them that you have a vested interest in their professional success, not only for yourself but for them. And that's the golden way to treat people in probably all businesses, but I've only ever been in one industry. So this is the one.
It's so spot on as well. I love it. To ask the kind of obvious question, because I imagine someone will be listening to this thing, and that's all well and good. Like, we're talking about these numbers. I get it. KPIs are really important. I need to measure a bunch of stuff. There's probably comes a point where people are measuring too much stuff, paralysis by analysis, as we call it, when you've got too many numbers to worry about. You're spending hours a week pulling them all together just to look at them. Then when you've got all the data, you sit there and go, now what the hell do I do with it all? So if someone came to you and said, Greg, what are the most important things that I should focus on tracking as a business of, say, 10, 20 people, because that's the average sort of size that we see listen to this podcast, what would you say are those most important things to be focusing on as an early stage business?
Right. Well, the first thing, just to mention, we've used the word KPIs a few times. That's a tainted phrase. I use it, but you can change it to dashboard, your
metrics, anything you want,
whatever you like. But the answer to that question is, you don't want. And by the way, on my academy, I've got hours on this stuff. You don't want.
Greg, you'll need to sort me out with a license. Even I'm not motivated to listen to your stuff as well. I really want to hear it. See what you've got to say.
You've seen some of the style today. I'm very passionate about it, because I'm very passionate about recruitment. I'm very passionate about the success of recruiters. I've had a lot of success helping other people be successful. I was a much better leader of recruiters than I was a recruiter, to be honest with you. And I wasn't always that way. I was pretty bad in the beginning, and I made all the mistakes, and then, got a lot of horror stories for you.
You can be warned as much as you want by other managers. You still end up making mistakes.
Yeah, you make them. I still make them. But the thing is, you don't want a lot of metrics. You just want the 3 or 4 things that are going to impact the result for that person at that time. And bear in mind that your KPIs will change. If we're in a candidate type market, they're going to be around outreach, headhunting, and finding candidates. If we're in a market like we're in now, they're going to be more around winning orders, but it's more subtle than that. It's like, for an experienced recruiter, right? Good to great. Here's a person billing, in Australia, 600,000-700,000 a year is very good. depending on the context, everyone will argue. But let's say it's a good recruiter. You don't make that person better by saying do more stuff. You make that person better by showing that they can get more out of the hours they work. So if you sat with a recruiter who was billing $700,000 a year, and you dived in, or dove in, whatever the word is, with her, and said, what's the percentage of jobs you're filling? You might find she's filling 1 out of 3. But if she can fill 2 out of 5, she's going to bill 20% more, 15% more, whatever the sums are. Right? So you help her on qualifying job orders, and then her KPI would be taking exclusive jobs, for example. Right? Somebody sitting over there who's a rookie, their KPIs might be very different. And so they're tailored, and it takes work by the owner or the leader, and it takes thought, and it takes collaboration. And the person comes into the weekly, and you should have a weekly one-on-one with each person. That's the most important meeting. I'd cancel every other meeting in every recruitment company except that one, because that recruiter needs to leave that meeting with great clarity of what a good week looks like. And that might be, I'm going to do 5 client meetings this week. I've got 12 jobs and I need to get coverage of 2 interviews out on each, whatever they are. And it's going to shift next week. But when they come in, you don't tell them. You say, Mary, good week last week, but we're not going to tell war stories. What are your goals for this week? And she, because she's trained to think this way and she's empowered to think this way, she says, I'll tell you what, Greg, I'm not going to do any client meetings this week. Interesting. Why is that, Mary? Because I've got 12 jobs. You didn't know this, Greg, but I took 6 job orders on Friday afternoon, and I need to get them covered. So I've got to get candidates. So I'm doing this. And you say, spot on. I couldn't agree more. You do that. Yeah. Have a good week. It's a 5-minute meeting. And she has got autonomy, self-esteem. She's empowered. But we've taught people to think about what the actions are. And that's going to, you've got people in this who listen to this who've got 10 to 12, 15 people. That's the most powerful thing they can do to make sure that every week, every person in the business knows what a good week looks like. They know what their activities are, and they know what quality they've got to improve on. That is it.
Totally. I'm a massive fan of that, by the way. Like, we'll sign up a customer and they'll come and say, we'll say, okay, what targets are you assigning today? And they'll walk in with 20 to 25 targets per person. Like, everything from the number of calls, the A jobs they're getting on, the interviews that they're arranging, the offers to extent, the conversations, like reference checks, everything. And the thing we'll always turn around and say is like, look, one target is never going to be enough. It's like saying, right, your job is to score goals. How? Like, what do I do to get towards there? Where's my guidance on that? We tend to say if you're finding 3 to 5 things to focus on and have those are the targets that you put at the top. And that, again, the most important things, it can be revenue, it can be number of new BD calls they're having at the start, jobs being sourced, and that can be it. That can be their primary focus. If you really want to, chuck interviews in there as your golden metric. I always call the interviews the golden metric because it's the alignment of finding an opportunity that fits a candidate and also having a candidate that fits into that as well, and having the two come together, being confirmed by the customer. Whereas the CV is you as the recruiter saying, I believe there's a match here. The interview is the client confirming that for you. But I can't stress enough, too many KPIs or too many targets just completely murders people.
I 100% agree. And if you go to the academy or read my book, I say 2 to 4 a week is enough to focus on. And they'll usually be job orders, resumes out, and interviews arranged. And you're 100% right, if I understood what you said, that candidates sitting opposite clients is the golden metric in recruitment, because as long as you've got the quality at a certain level, the more you have of those, the more placements you will make. Okay? So in many cases, I wouldn't target people on CVs out. I'd target them on interviews. Because if you're good enough to send 3 CVs out and get 3 interviews, why am I going to argue about CVs? I'm going to argue about, I'm going to say, get those interviews, right? As long as the quality's there. You've always got to keep that in mind.
Completely.
And remember that it switches. I mean, this is where a leader can be really helpful. A recruiter's flying, making lots of placements. And they don't tend to see what's coming up, right? So you might have a meeting and say, right, what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to get resumes out. How many jobs have you got? Oh, I'm good for jobs. Don't worry, Greg. I've got 10 orders. So how many of those are you going to fill in the next week? Oh, I'll fill 6. And the rest, I might lose 2. So you've really got 2. So isn't now the time that you've got to, good point. So I should do some BD. Right. Let's focus on that. But you're not telling them, you're leading them. And I don't mean that in a condescending way, because quite often the recruiter will say, but this, that, and the other. But the thing is, you're not lecturing, you're not dictating, you're not bullying, you're not micromanaging. You are having a business consultation based on numbers, because you measure and you know what leads to success. And you help the person see that. Yeah.
Curious to get your take on this as well, because there's a client that we worked with a couple of years ago. They had a really nice system that I haven't heard too many others using, where they said, right, look, there's three gates here that we unlock based on your performance. If you're hitting your revenue numbers, we don't care about your activity. We don't care about your outcomes. We just care about if you've got that number. If you're getting that number, we have no questions. If you're missing that number, the first thing we'll be asking you is, what outcomes are you getting? Are you getting interviews through? Are you getting offers out? Are you getting these sort of end of funnel activities that suggest something might come soon? If you're not hitting those, we'll go back and look at your inputs or your activities. Are you making enough calls? Are you sourcing enough jobs? Are you getting CVs out to the right level? And this really interesting layer of saying, like, look, we'll trust you entirely with the whole placements thing. Like, if you're getting the revenue, we don't care. But if you are under delivering or not hitting your own goals, we'll dial this back and keep on looking back further and further towards the near term, essentially, and say, are you doing enough in the last 2 or 3 days for you to be able to get the outcomes and the placements that you need later down the line? Do you think that's a good way of running things, or would you always be encouraging people to say no, regardless of how good someone is, look at the very start of the process and understand their activities and inputs as well? Like, how was your take on that?
I think that's completely 100% wrong. Completely wrong. And it's been, I'll tell you why, because let's take what's happened in the last 3 years. Across your country and mine, there are thousands of recruiters who had a brilliant 2022. And in 23, it got a bit hard. And in 24, they're struggling. And it's because they weren't trained on what the right activities were when they were flying. It's when you're doing well that you teach people. It's even a better time to teach people, because you take that high performer that they left alone. He might be filling 1 job out of 4. He might be wasting, but he's hitting some good revenue numbers because the market's booming. Or he secured 2 big clients who are feeding him a lot of, and he's making the numbers. But then he loses those 2 big clients, and he doesn't have the skills. He doesn't have the understanding. He doesn't believe the mantra of managing and measuring what you're trying to manage. And then you've got to, in his downtime, go all micromanage on him because you have to, because you haven't taught him the way to run his business. So it's wrong. Yeah. It's completely wrong.
I think there's so many recruiters that, like, obviously it's not really their fault as such. It was very much a leadership decision. Is they boomed during 21 and 22 and were like, we've got so many jobs coming in. Like, I haven't got to do any BD calls. Like, why would I bother? I'm so busy already. And companies, I think, as we know, overhired ultimately and then paid the price in 23. Like, it stung so many people. But that was probably a classic example of, like, forget about the BD. Don't worry about it. Just focus on closing the jobs. We hit 23 when the market's coming down and no one knows or really is particularly willing to do BD. And that led to this massive shift in the sector where we saw loads of heads being removed from businesses, for example. People were suddenly failing to really hit any kind of target across the business, and things got really tough, which, like you say there, is probably a case of taking your foot off the gas when the times are good and not trying to say, let's keep reinforcing those fundamentals, because the market will change, as it has many times.
As it has, and I predicted it, which wasn't clever of me. I've just seen 7 or 8 cycles. And I had conversations in 22 with recruiters, and I said to one recruiter, I remember it so well, who's your best client? Listen to this as a lesson for the company that thinks that way. And she said, some company. I said, why? She said, I've had 15 placements there this year. I said, who's your contact there? And she gave a person's name. I said, when did you last see your contact? She said, I've never met her. I said, don't you think that would be a good idea? And I swear to God, this 2 years experienced recruiter looked at me condescendingly and said, Greg, you don't understand. My client loves me. And I said, I think you're going to find one day she doesn't love you. And if I were you, now that she's engaging you, not only go and see her, but go and meet 4 other people in that company. Anyway, that woman did not do that. She's out of the industry, because when the wheel turned, that client didn't take her calls. It's when you are working with a client that you can build a relationship. That's when I don't know whether you call it BD or not, but it's certainly client nurturing. And all those recruiters who found they were left in no man's land as the tide went out, they should have, and their leadership is who I blame, they should have nurtured those clients. I sat down with, as the market declined, I sat down and said to my clients and others, who are your top 25 clients by revenue? And they listed them. I said, how many times have we seen these people? My God. They had taken it for granted. They hadn't even met them. It was all email. And of course, when the tide went out, they got left high and dry. So, no, I don't think, as I said to you, maybe it was off camera, the thing that most owners of recruitment, or many, do is when somebody's doing well, they leave them in the corner, they treat them like a prima donna, they put their name up in lights, and really when somebody's doing,
them leave,
but when somebody's doing well, that's the time to sit with them and say, you're good, but I want to help you be great. And smart recruiters, and most people get that. You've got to give people the feedback they deserve and the acclamation that they deserve, but you need to say, look, You're great. Your numbers are good. You build 600,000, but you're only filling one job out of 3. Imagine if we could change it to 1 out of 2. Let's work on that as an example. And you do that, and the person goes from 600 to 800, extra 200,000 a year, of which the recruiter gets 50 grand and the company gets 150. Who's losing? Nobody.
It's so spot on. And honestly, I love hearing you talk about this stuff. You actually said the line there of that third topic that I'd love to get into a little bit as well. I'm aware we've gone for half an hour here about metrics and all this kind of good stuff, which again could go on for hours about, but I do want to touch on this next part as well, taking good people to great. When we had a chat about this before we went live, I kind of said every business leader will turn around and say, obviously in defense of their team, yeah, I've got a good team. I think they're a good team. They're great at what they do. Like, we're doing okay. But people's measurement of what is good and what is great is obviously all kind of personal opinion in a way. So I'm really curious to hear your take on how do you take people from good to great? And maybe we start at the beginning. Your first piece was around how to get newbies up to speed fast. What's your recommendation? What have all these years of wisdom got for you here that you share with us?
Well, first of all, if I could have $1 for every time I've been told in board meetings and coffee meetings that XYZ consultant is good, she's really good, she's good. And then one day I come in and she's been fired. And I'm like, wasn't she good? No, she wasn't good. I'm like, well, how did she go from good to not good? Oh, we misjudged her. For 2 years, you've been telling me she's good. And you're right. People make up what's good and bad. They like somebody. She says the right things. So once again, it comes back to measurement. Like take a newbie, for example, right? A rookie, somebody who's not been a recruiter and is in the business. People say to me, okay, again, thousands of times people have said, how long should you wait for somebody to build before you decide that, how long does somebody have to build before you fire them? And I'm like, you're focusing on the wrong thing. The first thing is that most people, when they get newbies into the business, they sit them down and let them listen to people. And they think they're going to learn by osmosis. Now, there is some benefit to that. But actually, there's 3 things you should focus on with a newbie. And the first is assess their attitude and cultural fit. Right? So if you've got a newbie and they come late to meetings, I'm going to train you, come in at 2:00 tomorrow, Derry, and I'm going to train, and they come at 2:30. The first thing is you need to sit them down and say, that's disappointing. If we say 2, it's 2. You're not going to write them off for that. But if it happens 3 times, you've got a problem. So that's the first thing, attitude and behavior. And I just mentioned timekeeping, but it could be any number of, given a small task, not doing it, etc. That's the first thing. And the second thing is their ability to hit mini goals that you set them. So actually, I think I'll come to that third. The second thing is their learning ability. And I see this all the time. We train a newbie, we give them a training course, and then we say they've been trained on that. But there's no checking in. So everything you train with a newbie, you should have a test. Now, that might be, I'm being serious, if you train the person on our company values and our terms of business, give them a multiple choice test. I'm being serious. They get 1 out of 10. Now, if somebody gets 1 out of 10 on something you've just trained them on, they're either thick, which is a problem, or they weren't concentrating, which is a problem. So you go back and say you got 1 out of 10. That's a problem. We're going to run this test tomorrow. Do it again. They got 1 out of 10 again. Or they got 9 out of 10, more hopefully. So you train somebody how to screen a candidate on the phone. A lot of people do that. Then they say it's done. It's not done. Role play. And they're not very good at it. They get 3 out of 10. You say, okay, that's not bad. You give feedback. Let's do it again tomorrow morning. 5 out of 10. Okay. I'm happy with small incremental gains. I'm not happy with plateauing. And I'm talking about all this in the first 3 months. And the final thing is you set people mini KPIs. You can't give a newbie KPIs. Well, you can actually. Let's say you've got somebody joined the temp team and she's been there 6 weeks. You say, okay, Mary, here's a list of 60 candidates that used to work for us. We don't know where they are, but here's their phone numbers. Here's a script. Call them and try and see if they're interested in temp work. And when can you do that by? Typically, the person will say, I'll do it by this afternoon. You'll say, no, it'll take longer than that by tomorrow night. Come back to me at 5 o'clock and let me know how you've done. First sign, she doesn't come back by 5 o'clock. Second sign, she's only done 6 of them in a day and a half. Those are the sorts of measurements. You've got to keep on checking in. The amount of times someone said to me, oh, this person's not billing, but she's really nice, and she's been here a year, we think she might still make it. You've got to be kidding. You need to have found out
got a
in
year of
3
evidence
months.
then, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you need to find out within 3 months. I'm not saying they have to. And the other thing that people do is they've got two people, Greg and Derry. And Greg makes 2 placements in his first 3 months, and Derry makes nil. So Derry's the problem.
How kind of you, Greg. Could have flipped that
Yeah.
analogy.
But the thing is, you could be the better recruiter, right? I could have made 2 placements because I was fed something, had a bit of luck. That's not the measurement in the first 3 months. The measurement is attitude, learning and coachability, and hitting mini goals. And you will find out. You'll find out in 6 weeks whether they're worth persevering with. Can't predict whether they're going to be superstars, but if they're learning, their attitude's good, and they're doing what they asked, that's the focus point. In the second 3 months, we might be looking for dollars out of their activities.
Totally. And I love that. That aligns so much to how we think about they're called SDRs internally, sales development reps. Their job is to go out there and book meetings. And although we'll say, okay, there are numbers in the first 3 months you want to ramp up to their ramp target, there are people that we said, like, cool, you didn't hit the ramp target, but we see the attitude that you're putting in every single day. We see that you're always so keen to learn, that you are improving day by day. You're asking questions. You're a good culture contributor. There's more than just the end number that you're after out of someone. And I really love how you said that is placements is not the measurement in those first 3 months. Those other 3 areas.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, obviously, it's nice if people hit some goals, and that's encouraging. But it's not. It is no way an indicator of their long-term success. And so many people, they want to know whether they should fire somebody after 3 months, if they build or not. And I'm like, that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at these things. And you also get the reverse, don't you? Where you actually have a lovely person who's so likable and they're so helpful and their attitude is great and they're trying hard, but they also don't have the core competency. And that's actually harder, right? And that core competency might be resilience. It might be grit. It might be courage. It might be the ability to think on your feet, which a good recruiter requires all those things. So my big advice is with newbies, invest a lot in the first 3 months. And if they're going to fail, it sounds harsh, but it's good advice. If they're going to fail, make sure they fail fast. Obviously, we don't want them to fail. We've hired them to succeed. We're going to give them every tool and resource and support to succeed. But if they're going to fail, they must fail quickly, not in 12 or 18 months. Because they would have cost you 300 grand by then.
Totally. I think a really big part of it is people drag it out so long to try and make that assessment as well. What's your assessment on when you should be giving this feedback to people? Let's say, for example, you hire someone and they're consistently 2 minutes late to every meeting, or the behavior is not quite, you can feel something's off, but you're not quite sure what it is yet. People then sort of stave it off, and maybe they'll say, like, there's a great example you used a second ago. They're not hitting numbers, they're not doing this, but this thing over here is really good. And it's kind of trying to ignore the bad and focus very highly on the good, so you can sort of justify and say, this person's worth holding on to. No one wants to go through that horrible choice of firing someone. It's one of the worst things that you can do as a manager. It feels horrible to do for most people. But how quickly are you having these feedback cycles, or how often are you letting your behavior manifest itself before you say, okay, that's a problem, now we've got to talk about it?
How quickly? On the first day.
So as soon as you see someone being late, grab them to one side, say, hey, you've been late, just so you're aware.
I swear to God, right? And I will acknowledge that I'm a bit of a prick. I used to look for people to make those kinds of mistakes so that I could pull them up on it. Not in a demeaning way, but if I saw someone come to a meeting late that I was running, I'm famous for this, infamous, I would say, well, the bus is, what's happened? They go, oh, sorry, I just got caught up. I said, no, but we started at 9 and it's 10 past 9. And just 30 seconds of discomfort, and they will not do it again, right? And if they're not hitting their targets, feedback. What a lot of people do is what you've described, is they go, oh, she's new, we can't make a bit of a song and dance about this, let it go. But don't you realize that you're then teaching them that behavior is acceptable?
What you permit,
and
you
that's
promote.
not what you want.
Saying we have.
You've got to go the other way. And I've made some comments about punctuality, which is only an example because it's a bugbear of mine, but it could be anything. Like, call that candidate back. Have you done it? Oh, no, I'll do it tomorrow. No, but when I said call the candidate back, like, maybe I didn't communicate properly, Derry. I mean, like, now, mate. So can you do it? Now, even that, I'm 3 weeks into my job. I don't want my boss to speak to me like that. I've learned the lesson. If he asks me to do something and he says now, it means now, or I need to tell him I can't do it now because I've got 3 other things to do. And that's all fine. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to set a culture, I have so many people talking about the culture of their business, and the way they describe it is completely at odds with the reality of what the culture of the business is. because managers don't keep people. If you want, we could have talked about all night about this topic, but I'll say it now. I believe that the way to lead people is through accountability blended with empathy. Those are the two things. So you do need to understand people are having a shit day. You do need to understand somebody's got problems at home. You do need to understand somebody's scared to make a cold call. You've got to have empathy for that. But at the same time, and this is why, I go back to you got to measure what you want to manage. You've got to hold people accountable for the actions that they've agreed to do, which we've agreed drive the business forward. You've got to give them support, help, but it's the blend. Now, I see too many people going all accountability, do this, do that, and I see people running their businesses like some sort of hippie commune. It's all empathy and love. Well, it's not. You've got to do the stuff. Otherwise, you won't succeed.
Totally. I mean, culture in itself is such a wide reach, and I'm sure you probably feel the same. It's such a wide-reaching topic that we can get into so many different areas on. If I had to touch on one of them in itself, I think at least where I see younger, more fledgling businesses get it wrong is you have a top biller or someone who's done really well at a previous business and believes, I can do this better. They leave and then get frustrated when they hire people that they aren't as good as they are and don't really know how to get that empathy across to them and have that real understanding. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, can you teach people how to be empathetic? Because that's a skill that you really have to find within yourself, I think, to really care about someone else and understand their positioning. But how do you go about finding that balance when it comes to empathy versus accountability? You spoke about it a little bit there as well, being able to take on both. But at what point do you turn around and say, there's a lot of empathy being shown here, but there's still accountability of things that need to be done? Where does the consideration sort of end and say, look, this is still a business. We've still got to see expectations being shown here?
Well, I'm not sure if I understood the whole question, but just one of the points is, which may not be answering your question, and I will answer it,
right.
is we often promote the wrong people into leadership roles in our business. We promote the big biller. And the big biller might be a good leader, but often the big biller is selfish in a healthy way. Often the big biller likes their name up in lights. They get their affirmation from, and to be a leader of recruiters, you actually have to get your jollies out of helping other people be more successful than you. And that was my one thing. I help people be great recruiters. Most of the people who work with me are much better recruiters than me. But that's what my job was. So I guess I was doing my job. In terms of the balance of empathy and accountability, that's another reason why you have to go back to measuring, right? Because you will say to somebody, okay, what are your goals for this week? And between you will work it out. And then you'll say, I often would say, the person would say, I'm going to do 20 of these and 30 of those. And I'd say, really? Can you do that? Yeah. So, well, you know that I'm going to expect you to do it. So should you pare it back a bit? Let's rather do something that okay, yeah, I'll do 15 of those and 10 of those. And then I'll say, so you can really do that. Barring something, you're going to do that. And then I would say, okay, that's tremendous. Those are exactly the right activities. If you can do that and do them well, it'll be a successful week. If you're not going to hit it for some reason, come and see me on Wednesday and talk about it. It's a genius move, because then a person comes through the next week and they haven't hit their numbers, and you'll say, well, I was here on Wednesday, mate. Where were you? Come and tell me why. And so you build in this accountability. But they could come to you on Wednesday and say, Greg, look, I had to go to the dentist. Also, I took 6 jobs from this client. I'm not going to hit my goals. And then your empathy comes in and says, yeah, got it. No, that's cool. Go to the dentist. In fact, take the full, don't come back. Take the afternoon off. And then the next day, focus on those. All good. Because it's a dynamic world and things change, and lives and clients and candidates and God knows what. So we're going to be empathetic, but that person is accountable to do it or tell you why they're not going to do it. And build that into your culture. And my God, see your business fly.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, that pretty much answered the question I was going towards on the empathy side, is basically pulling it back to the piece around, know what the numbers are, know what the expectations are, but really have the person tell you what those numbers are going to be. Like you say, if they're turning around and saying they can do a 30 in a week, and you're like, well, normally, yes, but here you are currently in a spot where something's happening, you're still learning, for example, whatever else it might be, or something's happening outside of work. What's the more realistic number you can give me at this point? And still having that accountability conversation is really important, right?
It is very important. And it's more than that, and this is one of the reasons why I'm all in favor of blended work. But when somebody's not in the office, it's very hard to do what I'm about to say. So a good leader will pick up the nonverbal signals. The person's saying, yeah, I'm good, Greg, I'm good, I'm going to do it. And you just see as you walk past in their face, or you see the way they're talking to someone, that there's something wrong. And then you might sit with her and say, hey, Mary, You're not looking happy. What's up? Tell me what's up. And, Greg, I'm just so stressed. I said I could do 20 of these, but I'm scared about doing these things. And that's when empathy comes in and says, look, tell you what, just call candidates today. Call 50 candidates, make them feel happy. And tomorrow, you and I are going to do some training on the cold call. Okay? I'll give you some help. Don't stress. Take it easy. Now, that might be the smartest thing to do because the person's going to feel understood. You're still going to hold them accountable, but in that moment, you show empathy. So, that's what I'm talking about. On other occasions, if somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes and they're not doing their job, you're going to go the other way. You're going to hold them accountable and you're going to hold the mirror up and say, mate, if you want to be on this team, which is a great team, you're going to have to play well, and you're not playing well.
Totally.
See, sport always.
That former example is that great piece, but then our balance between empathy and accountability, I think, is where you get into with that one, which is spot on as well. Yeah. Again, people remember how you make them feel, right?
Totally. And I think that's, again, so I used to make, I got a quick wit. I'm a smart ass half the time. You can see I can talk. And when I was young, because I became a manager very young, I used that too bluntly. And I learned very quickly that people don't learn if you humiliate them. And I never meant to humiliate anyone, but I'm a smart ass, right? So I very quickly learned that there's a time and a place for the jokey, smarty pants thing, and there's a time and a place for listening. That's the other thing you've got to become very, very good at as a leader, is listening, and proper listening. Don't jump in and assume, which is don't interrupt. These are all faults of mine. I've had to work at them. I'm much better now. But listen to the person. They'll say, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm loving it. And you say, come on. I feel as though you're not enjoying, is there something on your mind? And out it will come. And then you can help deal with it. And a person feels that you can be trusted if they can tell you that they're struggling and you don't kick them in the balls for it. You actually help them. Because if somebody tells you that they're struggling, they are really exposing themselves. So that's the time that you respond with help and assistance. In the end, they've still got to be accountable. There's no passengers. But you can't expect everyone to progress at the same pace. You can't expect everyone to never have a down day. People have got things going on in their lives, and you've got to be much smarter at active listening and understanding to be good at leading people, I think.
No one's put the arm around the shoulder versus when to, really drive the point home. Look, here's the accountability you promised me.
Totally. And holding people accountable doesn't mean cracking the whip. It means just helping them achieve the goals they've set themselves. And also, we're very good at making excuses for ourselves, all of us. And sometimes they're valid, and sometimes somebody needs to say, mate, that's bullshit. You just didn't do it very well. And that can be helpful too, in the right time.
Yeah, love that as well. Look, honestly, I could keep talking to you for hours about this stuff. I find it all so interesting to go into, and clearly you've got loads to share and loads of experience on this as well, which is brilliant. I think what I need to do is buy both books and have a good read of those as well to really hear all your thoughts in detail, which I shall be doing after this. Before we look to wrap things up, somewhere we're coming up to time as well, I have a little quick fire round, a few quick questions for you that I don't prep people on. It's always part of the fun. Nothing too scary. First question I want to ask you, and I imagine... Do
you think there's a chance you're going to scare me, Derry?
No, I think actually you might find some of these quite funny, actually. I mean, I think I can predict the answers to a couple of these questions already. Favorite book that you've read to do with business, recruitment, whatever else it might be?
I just read a book by a guy from the Czech Republic, actually. His name is... I know him well. I only saw him a couple of weeks ago. And I think I've got it up here. You guys are going to see I'm wearing shorts. I don't care.
No, I'm all good. Just your belly.
Yeah, well, that's easy to spot. Robo Sapiens.
HR Robo Sapiens.
By Jose Cadleck. It's his explanation of how AI is going to impact recruitment. I'm halfway through it. I'm enjoying that. That's very current. It's part of my nano degree I'm doing on myself to know more about AI and automation, how it's going to impact. Because I need to, because I'm an advisor, right? So how can I advise if I don't understand that? But I need to learn it. So that's good. 40, 50 years ago, How to Win Friends and Influence People, still a classic. So those are a couple.
Love that. Cool. Favorite podcast?
I don't think I've listened to a podcast for a long, long time. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. That's all good. Favorite, again, I hate the word, favorite influencer on LinkedIn. Who do you find, whose content do you find inspirational or insightful?
I learn a lot from people on LinkedIn. I like Ross Clennett. He's an Australian guy. He used to work for me, but not for decades. So he's really interesting. James Osborne in the UK.
Oh, James, well,
Puts out some good stuff. He's also a friend of mine. I like what he has to say. Those are a couple of people that come to mind. They may not be, like globally famous, but they are. They know. I know. Well, I know them, and I know they understand recruitment, and therefore I value their input. I like Neil Carberry, the REC guy. He's smart. He's thoughtful. He's not a recruiter. He runs a recruitment association, but he's very thoughtful about the future of the industry. And whenever I go to the UK, I buy him a beer. Well, I pretend to buy him a beer, but then I put it on his expense account, and we talk about it. So there's a few people that you should definitely look at.
Love it. And this one can be a couple of minutes, to be fair. I imagine you can think of a few. Favorite horror story from the industry? I always like asking this one. And this can be about you. It can be about someone that you've coached. It can be about someone that maybe you don't even know that particularly well. There's always these little moments that make you cringe and die inside a little bit when you hear them. I'm curious to hear one of yours.
Well, I'll tell you a couple from, mostly I come out badly. Well, the first one was when I was working in London. Where are you? You don't sound like you're
Birmingham.
Yeah, right. I was at Birmingham the other day, actually, at the expo in, that...
The RE, the NEC.
Yeah. Anyway, I was in London, had 3 years experience, got a job with accountancy personnel, which was the business that became Hayes. Oxford Circus, 10 of us in a room about as big as the study I'm in now, all on the phone, no computers, obviously. We interviewed people behind a screen, placed 4 or 5 permanent candidates a week. It was like a scene out of Wall Street, right? It was just, there were no rules. It was fast and furious. Anyway, when the boss came around, because we had 6 offices in central London, he would come around, and if he wanted to talk to you about something serious, there was no private room. There was no interview room. We just interviewed candidates behind a screen. So he would take you for a walk around the block. And one day he came in and he said to my boss, whose name was Don, he said, "Don, walk with me." That wasn't a good sign. And off Don went, up Great Castle Street, or Portland Street, around to Oxford Street. And he got fired outside the Boots chemist in the street. And he had his jacket on. And that was it. Fuck off. Never came back to the office. I have not seen that man for 30 years. We're friends on LinkedIn. But that was the last day I saw him. Anyway, the boss comes back in and he says, "Savage, walk with me." And I thought, my results weren't too good. I thought, shit, this is it. I'm gone. Anyway, outside the Wimpy Bar, he made me the boss. Comes back in, says to all my colleagues, that until that moment I'd been colleagues, now I was their boss. He said, "Don's gone, Greg's the boss." And he left. That was my promotion. Man, it was hard. In that same environment, we used to take jobs over the phone and sell candidates over the phone. And if we couldn't sell candidates over the phone, we'd just send resumes to the client. Everyone could send as many resumes as they liked. And I sent a resume to a client, and the client called me. And, being English in London in the 80s, he said, "Mr. Savage." And I thought, oh, this is good. I said, "Yes." He said, "Did you send the candidate XYZ?" and mentioned her name. I got excited. I said, "Yes, I did," thinking he was going to say, "Can I interview her?" He said, "Well, she works for me, and I can see her through the glass door. Thank you for letting me know she's looking for a job." I sent a candidate to her own boss. That was horrific. And then the final story I'll tell you, I won't name the company, even though it doesn't exist anymore, but was in the UK, Christmas party in the 80s. Wild and woolly. Anyway, on the Monday, we heard that 2 people had been caught performing a sex act under the table.
Oh, dear.
It's not that unusual in the recruitment world, but the unusual part is this. The woman got fired, and the man didn't, because he was a big biller. Now, I was 24. It was 4 decades ago. But even in my innocence and youth, I thought, that can't be right. That doesn't sound fair. But that's what they did, and no one remarked on it. So the world has thankfully changed. But that was unbelievable. And those are the sort of good stories. And they're just ones that involve me. Not the last one. I didn't even know about it until afterwards. But that's the sort of thing that used to happen back in the day. And there are many, many others, but we should have a whole podcast on it.
Oh, I'm sure there will be many podcasts about that sort of stuff. I've heard many stories myself. But Greg, that's pretty much all the questions I've got to ask you at this point. Honestly, again, I could keep going on forever, but I know you've got a meeting starting in a few minutes as well, so I will let you go. But let's do this again sometime because there are plenty more topics I'm sure we can get into, and that was really, really insightful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and feel free to cut out the close-up of my bulging belly when you get a chance.
Knowing our editor, he'll highlight it, and I apologise for that in advance.
Yeah, but I don't. I really don't care. It's all good.
Fantastic. Well, look forward to this one coming out, mate. Any final plugs that you want to do? Again, books are always worth looking into. Is it the Recruit the Savage Way and the Savage Truth?
Recruit the Savage Way is best for recruiters and leaders of recruiters. This book, The Savage Truth, really tracks the recruitment industry in a way because it starts in the 80s and it's the businesses I was involved in, it really has got some great lessons about how to prepare and deal with recessions. It's got all those leadership issues I spoke about in it. You can buy them off my website. Typically, if you're in the UK or Australia, just Amazon is the best. There's 4 or 5 different places on my website. The other thing is the Academy. It's hard to get people to see this. It took me a long time to learn. People get very hyped up about technology, and bear in mind that I started in recruitment 16 years before the internet was invented. So I've seen all the technology changes, right? And the internet was going to kill recruitment and job boards and LinkedIn, and they haven't. And now it's AI. The point is this: in the end, all recruiters and all recruitment companies will have the same tech. No one's going to have proprietary tech. You're going to all have it. So the differentiator is and always has been the skills of your recruiters. And also, if you go to the P&L of every recruitment company, 60 cents out of every dollar will be spent on recruiter salaries. It's your biggest cost. It's your biggest influencer for your results. Spend more time developing those people. And yes, my academy is good. It'll help a lot. But even if you don't go with the academy, invest more time in taking your average recruiters from good, your good recruiters to great, and your underperformers up or out. Preferably up.
Coach up or coach out. Always one of my favorite lines.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So,
Greg,
that's it.
Thank you so much. That was honestly phenomenal. Really looking forward to them coming out as well. And again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you very much.